Before we jump into today's episode, I want to tell you about something new and something cool that we just made for you. I wrote it myself. Now, here's my assumption. If you are listening to this podcast, it probably means that you want to build long-term wealth with a rental real estate portfolio, and you would probably like to do it with some creative financing. And as I talk to people who want to do that, I know a lot of questions come up, and I thought there's really no great single resource that really captures the entire picture of how that works. But I have solved that problem because I have written a new PDF that is just for you, and it's called the Step-by-Step Guide to Buying Your First or Next Rental Property Without Relying on a Lender to Approve You for a Loan. Like I said, I wrote this thing myself, and if I do say so myself, it's pretty thorough. And in this, you're going to learn a few things. I'm going to teach you about the 3 key strategies to find and negotiate quality off-market real estate deals that nobody else even knows are for sale. I'm going to teach you about what I call the yeses framework for getting off-market sellers to accept your offers. And then I'm also going to teach you the 11 simple steps that you need to take to get your first or your next deal accepted without needing to go to a bank and apply for a loan and just hope that they give it to you. So if you would like to get this free downloadable PDF, just go to rentalwealthguide.com and you can download it right now. rentalwealthguide.com and get your download of the step-by-step guide to buying your first or next rental property without relying on a lender to approve you for a loan. Now, on with the show.
Successful real estate investing isn't all about we buy houses and motivated sellers. That's the lowbrow approach, and it gives real estate investing a slimy reputation. Gross. There is a better way, a more genuine, human approach. We are thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs, and this is Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing.
This is Jeff from The Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur. Welcome to episode number 21 of Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing, a show for those of us who never really felt at home in that we buy houses crowd. Now, in this show, we take a stand against what we call the lowbrow approach, the mainstream guru seminar distressed seller approach that ends up giving real estate investors a slimy reputation. And instead, we discuss the strategies, the tactics, and the philosophies that we call the thoughtful way, an enlightened approach to real estate entrepreneurship that focuses on constantly sharpening the sophisticated real estate entrepreneur's 3 most critical capabilities: seller relations skills, deal architecture skills, and opportunity vision. When all 3 of these capabilities are successfully in motion, you can make an excellent living today and build long-term wealth while creating value for everybody that you touch along the way. So today's show notes are at www.thoughtfulre.com/E21. Please do yourself and do us a big favor by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app. In the last episode, we concluded a 2-part series about what financial independence means to a thoughtful real estate entrepreneur and how it's different and unique for thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. So go back and listen to those if you have not already. And they actually provide a great segue into what is a very special episode. Today we have our very first inaugural interview on the Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing podcast. And as you can imagine, as a thoughtful real estate entrepreneur and somebody who's careful about making sure that the voices that are part of this conversation are aligned with our Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing approach, I thought very carefully about who to invite as our first guests. And I'm so excited today that our first guest is going to be Chad Carson. Now, Chad is also known as Coach Carson, and Chad is a longtime real estate entrepreneur, educator, father, husband, world traveler, and he's an all-around great guy. Chad's motto is invest in real estate, retire early, do what matters. So in this episode, we have a great wide-ranging conversation about lots of things related to real estate investing, financial independence, which is something Chad's really an expert in, living deliberately and using real estate as a vehicle to create the life that you want. Chad is the host of the Real Estate Investing and Financial Independence podcast, which, of course, I recommend that you check out. And he is at coachcarson.com, and he's also the author of a great book called Retire Early with Real Estate, which was published by Bigger Pockets. So without further ado, we're going to get right to the interview right now. I hope you enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. All right. I'm so glad to have Chad Carson, Coach Carson, here with us on the podcast. Chad, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, Jeff. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm so glad it worked out for you to connect up and have this conversation. If there are people listening right now who are not already familiar with your awesome content as a blogger and as a podcaster, can you just give us a little intro to yourself, and how would you find yourself at a point where you'd be invited to be a guest on a real estate?
It's a good question. So I have a website called coachcarson.com, and that was sort of an experiment of my real estate investing. I was investing for 17 years. I got out of college, I started doing that, and we can talk about, all the details of what I did, but I've been doing that full time since I got out of college, and I always loved learning. I just enjoy absorbing information. I enjoy processing it, and I feel like real estate's my career, but my calling's always been a teacher. And so I started blogging and writing just to like 20 people who were reading me locally, and I can't believe I wrote to like practically probably my mom and brother and uncle and people like that. And so that's a long running hobby for me, and it's turned into something online where people actually read it sometimes, which is fun. And so I think that's how I found you. You're doing great work with your podcast and your website, and it seems like there's a lot of resonance there. And so I think we're both trying to help people learn and use real estate as a tool, which is my goal is to help people do more of what matters. I feel lucky to have done that a lot in my life with my wife and 2 kids. We've traveled, we've lived abroad for a year and a half. Don't have to go to a regular job and check in. I can have a lot of flexibility with my schedule. So that kind of, whatever it means for everybody who's listening to do what matters, that's what I love real estate for, because it's got a lot of firepower to help you get to that point in different levels of doing what matters in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was telling you right before we started recording that in a way, I feel like I've known you for a while, because I had an educational package that included an interview with you. So it's like I have a little bit of an unfair advantage. I heard the backstory. But when I first kind of came across you that way, I was thinking, Chad real estate. And what I've noticed, or at least I feel like I've observed recently, is that it seems like your focus or your messaging or your positioning is shifting as much towards financial independence via real estate as real estate itself. First of all, am I interpreting that correctly? And if so, like what has, led to that sort of just shift in focus?
Absolutely. Yeah. Online, there's a community of people, and offline as well, but called Financial Independence Retire Early. It's gotten a lot of publicity and press the last year or so. And I've been friends with a lot of people mainly bloggers and other podcasters for several years who have been interested in just talking about that and sharing about it. And I sort of didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of my aspirations and goals as a real estate investor were not necessarily to be the greatest real estate investor of all times, although I'm trying to get better every day at that. It was more about the lifestyle, and it was about having independence, and it was about having flexibility, and that, like I talked about earlier, what is it that matters to you? And are you judging yourself by living your day doing that on a consistent basis? And so that idea of financial independence, I think, resonates with me. It's an idea that real estate's the vehicle, it's the tool. Financial independence is the financial goal that you're trying to achieve. And beyond that, that's what's so interesting with you and with other people who are in journey. Like it varies enormously what people are trying to do with that financial independence. And that's what makes it fun. It's an interesting community, because there are people like, there's a blogger named Mr. Money Mustache who I've become friends with. He's like got his own lifestyle, living off $20,000 a year and fixing up stuff and doing a lot of work with his hands, which is definitely not what I do. And there's other people who travel the world. There's other people who just like staying at home and tending their garden. And so that's what's fun, is that there's so many different ways to apply financial independence, but there are some principles and there are some common practices, both within real estate and just finance in general, that unite a lot of people who have that goal.
Mm-hmm. So kind of day one, when you got out of college, I know you launched right into real estate. Did you feel clear that that was your focus at that time, or was that something that kind of evolved and clarified for you over time?
Yeah, it was not clear in my mind. And I've told people that probably the first 3 or 4 years of my real estate career, I feel like I borrowed other people's goals. I went to seminars, and I could think of one in particular where I went to this all-day seminar, and it was a person who was really impressive, and she was flipping like 50 houses per year, like fixing up, flipping, and she made $20,000 per house. And I have a business partner, and so the two of us were at the seminar, and I remember looking at him. This is about the first year we were in business, and we had a little bit of success, not done too much. And we were looking, kind of grasping for business models and people to follow and models. And I think all of us, when we're new at something, we try to do that. We try to model other people. Yeah. And we were good enough at modeling somebody that we said, okay, let's just copy her. That sounds good. And so, what as often happens, you model part of it, but you don't apply all the details. And so we ended up like 2 or 3 years later buying, had 33 acquisitions in 1 year. And then some of those were multiple properties. So we got over 50 properties in 1 year. Not all of them were good. A lot of them we made a lot of money on, but we woke up about halfway through that year, and I'll have to credit my business partner more than me on this one, but saying like, wait a minute, like, why are we just buying a bunch of properties? Like, what are we doing this for? And it was a big realization to think, well, maybe we don't need to be that busy. Maybe we don't need to have that much volume. And we started learning about there are different business models. There's different approaches to real estate investing. And also it should start with what you're trying to accomplish in the first place. Back to financial independence. I think it became clear to me at that time, I'm trying to achieve financial independence. And I got very specific with writing down what it was. Like, I love playing basketball, pick up basketball in the middle of the day for 2 hours. That was something in 2007 that I realized, like, that's what I like doing. Well, how much money does that cost to pick up basketball in the middle of the day? In my case, it cost $0. I just went over to a gym locally that people got to use for free, and I played. But what I needed an abundance of time, and I needed flexibility. And flipping 50 houses a year was absolutely not going to get me there. So we started thinking about balancing what I learned, what Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Workweek would call like balancing time and money as two different currencies. Mm-hmm. You can try to make a bunch of money and you can maximize money, but it probably decreases your bank account of time as well. And so finding that balance, not only when you reach financial independence someday, but finding it now when you have a business. Like, should I shoot for $500,000 a year, or should I be happy with making $100,000 this year or $75,000 this year and having a 15-hour work week? Like, that's the kind of decisions that sort of hit me over the head a few years into it.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So a lot of clarity about, I guess, or evolving clarity for you about figuring out what you really wanted, kind of what your why was. One of the notes I had that I wanted to cover that you said something there that I feel like I need to pivot to that right now is I feel personally, and maybe you relate to this a little bit and can speak to it, but there's a little bit of a conundrum between wanting to create financial independence and the sort of friction-free life that comes with that. That also then combined with the idea that entrepreneurship is a sport and it's fun. And you like doing what you're doing, and you like the challenge of this and that, or the thrill of the hunt with the deal. And do you ever find that those two things, do they create any conflict, or how do you deal with that? Because I know that it's certainly something I think about.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good question. I think, just speaking for myself, the entrepreneurship is very fun. Like, I never see myself not doing entrepreneurship my entire life. But I define entrepreneurship, and I think what is really the fun part about it for me is the creation process. It's here's a blank slate. Here's this brand new idea. Here's this something I have no knowledge about or I have no experience with, but yet I have a goal and I want to get better at it. And then you forge ahead, risk and everything, and try to accomplish that something. So that broader definition of entrepreneurship typically applies to a business and making money. But, and so that has been a lot of fun for me, both as a real estate entrepreneur. I'm doing some online entrepreneurship. But that idea, but what I've also found is that for myself, after a certain period of time, it's like that the newness kind of wears off a little bit. And so I find myself going through cycles of life. So like I was an acquisitions person my first 4 or 5 years in business. I just focused. I was meeting with sellers like 5 or 6 days a week, making offers all the time, doing tons of marketing, direct mail. And that was a fun period of my life. I don't want to do that anymore right now. Like that was something that worked for me. But I still do enjoy putting deals together. And so what I found for me, like a kind of an evolved business, is that I'm doing a little bit more experimenting with being the money behind the deal. So somebody will have a deal locally here, a realtor, my property manager, and they know I know how to put deals together, and I'm creative, and I have some money partners with me. And so they'll come to me and say, all right, I've got this deal. What do you think about it? But they were the one who talked to the seller originally. They're the ones who got it all started. And I can be a little bit more behind the scenes, still have the deal, still put it in motion. So I guess that's a long meandering way to say, like, the friction has been, like, I still like that business. I still like being an entrepreneur, but I like evolving into different roles as an entrepreneur, particularly when you think about your day-to-day lifestyle. Like the real estate business is a sales business. You're out there beating the pavement, and I'm willing to do that. If things go sideways or things get bad, I'm always willing to jump into the fire. But part of financial independence for me is having more control over your day. I had a friend who said one time, like, the ideal day for him, like in financial independence, is not having any kind of urgent, like somebody's calling you with something problem at their apartment or something, but you have lots of important things you do every day. So for him, it's creating, writing blog posts, teaching. And that's sort of where I'm going. Like I still have some urgent things happening. I still have problems here and there that I need to jump into, which is still fun. But I'm trying to evolve into a different kind of role within my real estate business, and also as a teacher and doing different things.
Yeah. So besides playing basketball in the middle of the day, like, what are some of the other attributes to you of a perfect day?
Well, these days my kids get off the bus at 2:45. So I've actually, I'm the kind of person that's just schedule and kind of get it in my head what the schedules are. And so 2:45, they get off the bus. I want to have things done and at least have like a 30-minute to an hour break where I'm there when they get off the bus. It just seems like with kids, for anybody who has kids and they get home from school, that's the time when they talk. They let you know what's going on, for better or worse. This day was awful at school. This is what happened. Or this day was great. This is the best thing that ever happened to me. And if you're not there during those 30 minutes, you miss it. and I think that's like, if you can't have, for me personally, if I can't have that flexibility to do that, then what's the point? And then, so that's one of them. Exercise, I mentioned basketball, but being able to exercise in the morning, have a quiet start to the day. I do some meditation and just kind of a little bit of journaling, and just be able to glide in the day like that's kind of nice. Get outdoors a little bit. My wife and I like to hike. We used to camp a lot more than we have lately. We want to get back into that. So I think, some combination of that: nature, exercise, family, community, friends, all of those are a nice day.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm not nearly as entrenched into the all the thinking behind the FIRE community as you are, but I've read and studied in quite a bit. And one of the things that always really resonates with me is just the extreme, like, intentionality about, like, what do you want to be doing? What do you want to be able to spend money on? And then start to also think about then, well, if this thing that I want to spend money on is really important to me, then, like, let's not restrict that. But then let's cut back on these other things that actually aren't as important. So anyway, as I listen to you talk about that, I just hear a lot of real, like, deliberate intentionality with all of that.
Yeah, trying. Probably better in theory than practice, but yeah, that's the idea for sure. And I have a friend, Paula Pant, who's in kind of who does some in the FIRE community too. Her whole website's called Afford Anything. And the idea is that you can afford anything, but you can't afford everything. And so there's this idea with money, like, you can have whatever you want in life if you give it enough time, but if you exclude other things. And so that's really what it's all about, is figuring out if for you, having a Ferrari and, like, driving down the road in a Ferrari is like, that's the best thing in your whole world, then okay, like, make that your goal. Or if what I just talked about was my lifestyle, and it typically involves people and relationships and experiences and growth. Those are the things, at least my study of, like, psychology and what actually makes people happy, is those intrinsic motivators, the things that kind of are a little bit more lasting, kind of high in terms of happiness. If you can build your life around those, whatever those are for you, then hopefully, that you kind of keep feeling better and better about what you're doing with your day and with your life.
Yeah. Have you seen that new movie called Playing with Fire that came out? It's not being distributed super broadly just yet, I don't think, but
Yeah, I have. I was actually friends with the person, Scott, Scott, who did the whole movie and put it together. And early on, I got to talk to him about what was going on with it. And it's just an amazing production behind the scenes too, just to see what he had to go through to get this movie funded and crowdfunded. And but it's a really interesting story too. He and his wife Taylor tells their story about he was all in on Fire. Listened to Mr. Money Mustache on a podcast interview. She was like, I'm not so sure about that, and was very much more skeptical. And that dynamic between the two of them, and and how they evolved, and the kind of conversation they had together around money was really interesting. I thought it was very well done.
I thought it was too. Yeah, from a filmmaking standpoint, I thought it was very, very well executed and polished, and then from a storytelling perspective too, and sort of compellingly conveying some of the concepts in the FIRE movement. I thought they did a really nice job with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's another question for you that came up. I actually just recently did 2 episodes thinking about financial independence and as a result of having watched that movie, actually. And so I feel like one of the things that a lot of people say, I want financial independence. And then they start to figure out what are the vehicles that are going to get me there. Mm-hmm. And what I feel like I say, and I'm wondering if maybe you are too, is I say, I already love real estate. I know this is going to be my vehicle. So now I'm trying to work from the vehicle into financial independence. Rather, it almost seems like I've chosen the vehicle in advance rather than,
right,
honestly being more agnostic about choosing the right vehicle to get there. But I've already said, hey, I love this game. This is the vehicle I'm going to get. Do you find that ever, to me, it seems like a very different thought process than people who have, for instance, W-2 jobs. They already have some kind of financial stability, but they're trying to get to a new level of independence. They're probably thinking of the vehicles in a more, they're probably evaluating them more evenly on an even playing field.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm with you on this. Like, it's interesting within the financial independence community. There's a lot of people who work a W-2 job, save a lot of money, and invest it in index funds. Like that's your vanilla kind of cookie cutter way to get financial independence. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's sort of the paper investing path. It's a little bit more passive. There's a little bit less control over the results. You have to just be diversified in the entire market. And what I found that kind of like you're saying, I think we self-select. I think the people who are attracted to real estate, my theory is we're a little bit more entrepreneurial. And so we want to have our hands in the pot, so to speak. We want to have some control over the process and some influence over the success of the process. So I see that fork in the road. There's some people who when I tell them about real estate and what we have to do, they're like, oh, they have like a nightmare look on their face. Like, oh my God, that's like the worst thing I've ever heard of. And so it self-selects, people who are more entrepreneurial, self-control, wanting to be in control of the process, go towards real estate. But then what I've also found, because I'm involved in the Bigger Pockets community, and there's a lot of diversity within there's 1 million members on Bigger Pockets. And there are some people who are into, syndicating and growing, getting bigger and owning 500 units and grow and leverage always leverage, never pay things off. And it's sort of there's a kind of slice of the real estate investing community who are okay with being a little bit simpler, or whatever that means for you, having enough properties but not trying to take over the world, and doing kind of starting the financial independence idea. I think is starting from the end and saying, all right, what kind of life do I want to live? How's money going to work into that? And do the same thing with real estate, and just say, I'm going to build a real estate business that makes sense for these goals that I've set for myself. Mm-hmm. And what I found, one of the cool goals that I sort of stumbled across, was that with real estate, you can sort of get to these plateaus where, let's say your goal is to have $5,000 a month in income coming in. Well, that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. There's not a get rich quick kind of thing, but you can work for 2 or 3 years and maybe get to $1,000 per month and get to a nice stable place and take a break for a year or two, or maybe 6 months, or maybe 2 months, and take these mini retirements. And that's my wife and I did that during the depth of the 2009 recession. We sort of shuttered up the business. My business partner was still here in town, but we didn't grow anymore in 2009. We just said, all right, we're just going to take a break for the last half of the year. And we went to South America went to Peru. I learned to speak Spanish, went to Chile and Argentina and hiked around in Patagonia. And I think that's one of the cool things about real estate investing is because you are in control of the process, you can turn the volume up, you can turn the volume down, you can get to these plateaus, you can take a break. And those breaks you might have these breaks and these plateaus the rest of your life. You might just enjoy the process of starting and stopping and slowly getting better. And that's sort of where I find myself. Like I still have some aspirations to do better with my real estate business. It's not where I want it. It's certainly got a nice plateau right now, but I'm also not willing to slip back down the mountain either. I don't want to go backwards. So it's kind of a slow growth process. Sometimes you take some leaps and you go a lot faster, but in the interim, here's the difference. It's like some people who are just growing all the time. They say they want to do all these other things in their life, but they're too busy working 60, 80 hours a week for 10 to 15 years instead of taking some breaks and enjoying the climb while they're doing it.
Yeah. That's a really great point. It's one of the themes I feel like I hear in the FIRE community is sort of the idea of not delaying living, right? Why not enjoy some of life now rather than save up and have, hope that you live long enough to hit that, retirement where you're just retired for the rest of your life. Why not break it up into chunks and have some of that now?
Exactly. And that's, as an entrepreneur, we have that ability. And that's, you and I are preaching to the choir here, but, if you're in the other path where you have to just work a job, save a bunch of money, and then eventually have enough wealth built up, it's hard to get off that treadmill. You've got, if you're a doctor and you make $300,000, $400,000 a year, it's kind of hard to get off of that for a year or two and then go back. Whereas if you do what we're talking about, you become a real estate entrepreneur or any business, any entrepreneur business, and then you can start building things and you can start and stop. That's a big difference. It's not talked about that much, but I think that flexibility is amazing. And I find myself talking to people in the FIRE community they're always thinking about that end goal, whereas a lot of us in the real estate community are thinking, okay, get to this goal, take a break. Get to this goal, take a break. And it's not like a one-time thing.
Yeah. So in your actual real estate business, one of the things you've mentioned now a couple times, or you've referenced a couple times that I remember hearing you reference before, when I heard your recordings years ago, is your business partner. And I've only had a couple experiences with partners, and it's challenging, right? I'm sure I'm not the only person who's experienced that, but I'm struck by the fact that you guys are still doing this. Can you tell us a little bit about, how does that work and what do you feel like has made that such a winning thing for you so far?
Yeah, it's a good question. My business partner, Tommy, he likes to be behind the scenes. So I've tried to get him to go speak with me at like a local RIA group. He's just like, no, you go ahead and do that. And it's just, maybe it says something more about me that I'm the one out there trying to talk to people, and he's just quietly behind the scenes doing it. But I think that there's a couple of things that, as I've reflected on it, that made it work. Like it was not when we first started, we knew each other. I felt comfortable with him. I felt comfortable with him as a person, just trustworthiness, credibility, that kind of thing before we got into our business. So I think that trust is, the trust is the glue of society, is the glue of relationships, the glue of business partnerships. There's a really cool book called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, the guy who wrote The 7 Habits, his son. And I love that book. I'm going to reread it because I think that it's such a simple idea on the surface, but if you can build your business around working with people you can trust and being the kind of person who other people can trust, I mean, his point is that it makes everything else go fast. Like it's very slow to build trust with somebody, and you can break that trust really quickly. But once you have that trust with somebody, think how quickly, like if you and I were doing a real estate deal and you just knew that, all right, I trust this guy. How much quicker can you give me the money to do a deal? How much quicker can we put something together? Because you just know I'm not going to screw you over. That's kind of the point. And so I guess going back to my partnership, there was a really good trust with him. And then as we got into the mechanics of the business, that's evolved over time. Like when we first started, I was the acquisitions person, and I talked to like some of our private money lenders. He was managing the remodels and then managing getting our properties sold or rented. So we just physically divided up the business like that. And I remember sitting in his living room when we had no business, And the first book we both read was called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And he recommended in that book, he's like, even if you're brand new as a real estate or as an entrepreneur, you should go through and act like you're a corporation and say, all right, this person's the CFO, this person is the bookkeeper, this person is this. And I remember we had like 15 or 16 roles within our flipping business. And we just went down the list. I was like, all right, Tommy, which one are you going to be? All right, you're that one, I'm this one. And so we divided up like those 15 or 16 tasks among ourselves. And that process has kind of continued since then, where we've no longer flipping houses, and he's a little bit less involved in the day-to-day management of the business, but we make strategic asset management decisions together. And he's got another business he does as well. And so I think we just have a constant dialogue, constant conversation. It started with trust. And then I think the other thing I would add to that is that we both had aligned goals. And so we both, if I had been the one who wanted to kind of pull back and not buy 50 houses per year and just kind of have a lifestyle business, and he wanted to go for the moon, that wouldn't have worked. So some of that might've been luck, to be honest with you, that we just happened to have some of that aligned. But just fortunately, that's continued to be, we've had similar goals, similar risk tolerances. We want to, like, we're more in the stage now where we're not free and clear on our properties. We still have some debt, but we're more aiming towards, instead of going out and buying 3 new properties and leveraging all those, we're more about, all right, we just sold a property, we got a chunk of cash, we might have to pay taxes on that, but let's just pay this property off to increase our cash flow, reduce our risk. So if you weren't on the same page with the big picture, some of those kind of strategic decisions would be hard to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So that point about trust, I think is so important in so many ways. But one of the things that makes me think of is, this podcast, Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing, the overall umbrella we call thoughtful real estate entrepreneurship. And I think that,
I love that too.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so that's actually a great point, because I think that a lot of the people who are listening right now, a lot of the people who are following any of this stuff that I'm putting together, are doing so because they feel a little bit allergic to the mainstream guru seminar kind of we buy houses, distressed seller kind of vibe that's out there, and the schmarmy get rich quick aspect of it. Yep. And so it's funny when you say that you love that. I was thinking that really one of the reasons why I felt like you were one of the first 2 people I reached out to do an interview for our show here was that, while this is kind of a squishy comment, the vibe I get from you is just one of being, you feel to me like a thoughtful real estate entrepreneur. You feel like an easygoing, nice, integrity kind of guy that does foster trust easily, right?
Thank you.
And
appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you for being that way. Mm-hmm. And so that resonates. Just your tone resonates a lot with me, and I think will here with our listeners too. And I wanted to find out, like, how do you feel like that? Like, just you being you has helped you kind of in your real estate investing career. You like you said, you were working really hard on acquisitions for a few years. I have to imagine that you being you and you being the person that you are probably helped you develop relationships well with sellers. But tell me, if you will, a little bit about how you think that's played in.
Yeah. Thanks you for that comment. And, it's a constant process of working at it and trying to be the kind of person you want to be. But when I remember reading a book early on. I was lucky to read a couple of these books like early on in my career, but one, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It was really struck a note with me. And maybe it's just because it was what I already thought and he was just putting words to it. But I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said, but he basically said influence. When you go out and influence people, and he was paraphrasing some of these get rich quick kind of people, I think, saying you can either work on like techniques, like you can have all right, here's a persuasion technique, here's some NLP, and here's the words you can say, you can look somebody in the eye, and you can, there's a lot of things that you learn at seminars that are supposedly going to help you influence somebody. And what Stephen Covey said, and I was like, yes, that makes a lot of sense, is that, those are simply techniques, whereas being a person who is in a certain way, who's principle centered, or at least what they are. We might not all have the same principles, but I think when we put words to how we trust people is typically this is what that person is putting themselves out there as, and then I meet them, and it seems similar to the way they're putting themselves out there. And so in real estate investing or doing business or selling education or whatever it is, that I think that's what I've had problems with a lot of the gurus and type people is I think they're kind of playing to the technique card. And then you go meet them or you see behind the scenes and you're like, oh man, that's not the same person that I saw out there. And I think the people we admire, whether it's a leader, whether it's a teacher in a classroom, whether it's a real estate investor, it's not unique to our industry. It's just that the people who try to approach it with a little bit more humility, a little bit more authenticity. And that's not easy. I have my non-humble, non-authentic moments as well. You do too, I'm sure. We all been there, but having that as an aspiration, I think is a little bit different. And it sometimes requires losing in the short run in order to win in the long run. So I'll give you an example with real estate. I had an approach when I negotiated with sellers that my goal was not necessarily to sell them on my particular technique, which was to buy their house. That was my service. That's what I wanted to do. To the best of my ability, I wanted to go there and help them understand their options. And so one of their other options is just listing the house with a realtor. Why should they not do that? Because if I was in their shoes, I would be asking the same question. Why wouldn't I just list it with a realtor? And that's an important question. And so I would try to address that in some way and say, all right, why don't you? Let me talk you into it. Why don't you just fix this house up yourself and just sell it? Why are you even talking to me? And have them talk me into buying their house. And very often what that means is I lose the deal. They go and just list it with a realtor. And I actually think that's if I had to start over, I would probably get my real estate license, which I did later on, but I probably would have done it in the very beginning. And I would sit face to face with a seller and I would say, all right now I'm not your agent. I'm not representing you yet, but I have my real estate license. I could do that. And so I want to talk to you about these options. Plan A, why don't you just list your house, go this way. Plan B, you could sell it to me, and here's a couple different options I could buy it. Okay, here you go. Plan A, plan B, and then maybe a couple options. And if really I would win in either case. So if they wanted to list it, which probably a lot more people would want to list it than sell it to me, then I could have a referral business where I would say, if you want to go through me, I'm not going to list it myself, but I have this really good agent who I trust, who I've vetted, and I would love to refer you to this person, and I think they'll take care of you. And then if that person listed it, they would be like, what a good deal for that agent to have a person like me out there hustling and bringing them a bunch of listings. I would be a valued customer or a valued referral client for that listing agent. They'd probably send me some deals whenever there was one that didn't fit their normal criteria. And then the seller would have this impression that I'm not trying to push them in one direction. And it's true. And so going back to our original conversation here, I could make that a technique. I could say, I'm going to act like the person who really cares about sending them to the agent. But behind there, if you really don't want to help them, if you really don't want to let them do what's best for them, it's going to come through eventually. And so that's where Stephen Covey's comment about are you just a person who uses techniques, or are you someone who's starting from something a little bit different? And then you go learn techniques to help you do whatever is important to you. It's a subtle difference, but I think you and I are kind of trying to get at that. That's a big difference between people who sell you education, people who try to sell you a house or buy a house from you. It applies everywhere, particularly in sales. Sales is one of those businesses where you can kind of you use your superpower for good or evil, right? That's the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Those are amazing points. So you still have your license today?
Actually, just a month or two ago, chose to put it on inactive because I used to do a listing here or there with my mom and dad bought a house and I helped them out. And I got so busy with traveling and doing some stuff and I couldn't do my continuing education. So I just put it on inactive, but I like to have in my hip pocket, kind of entrepreneurial spirit, it's kind of a backup to a backup plan. If I need to go out, my wife and I have these conversations and I say, during the 17 years I've been investing, I think I could become a real estate agent. I think I could be a bookkeeper. I think I could be a paralegal for an attorney firm because I do half the attorneys work for them for closings. I think I could be a financial, a mortgage broker. So I like knowing that I have some skill sets that I could lean on, even though I'm not using them right now, just keeping them sharp. And that's what the license to me is, just sort of that. It's just another skill set. 6 months, I think I could turn up the business and make that work if I needed to, or if I'm interested in that one of these days. But for now, I'm not. I'm just going to put it on inactive and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's a decision a lot of people in our space, in our position ponder. It's something I've pondered a couple of times. I have actually twice purchased the online course, that you have to take the test, and then got a few chapters in and then changed my mind. I've really gone back and forth about it. I had a lot of conversations with people, and I like the versatility that it provides. And what's funny is I feel like it's a little bit uncharacteristic actually of me to be really focused on sticking to my knitting, so to speak, because in a lot of other areas as an entrepreneur, I've got the entrepreneurial ADD and I get easily excited. But for some reason, in this one way, I've been able to stay really sort of regimented and saying, hey, stick to exactly what you do.
Yep.
Don't kind of cloud your focus. But I'm constantly questioning that and rethinking it and like, geez, is that the right choice? Because there are definitely times. I mean, I had a friend literally like 2 weeks ago call me and say, hey, I want to sell my house. What do you think it'd be worth? And I talked him through it. He said, well, can you just sell it for me? And I said, no, actually I can't. Maybe this person is begging to give me, commissions. And I'm grateful for that. And so it's been a difficult decision to sort of stay focused in that way. But
has it worked out in terms of your investing business? Has that grown and done better because of that focus?
I think so. And I think the answer is yes. And I think that a big part of my sort of identity as a buyer when I'm speaking with sellers is I'm very clearly saying, look, I am not an agent. I just am personally for my own portfolio interested in discussing buying your property from you. And I feel like the purity of that message has been important. I know it's been important to me anyway when saying it. Maybe it's not as important to them as I think it is, but that's been my justification for not getting it all along is that I just really want to stick straight and narrow with this message of I am not an agent. I'm just a fellow landlord like you are, basically.
I got it. And I love hearing that because here I was talking about that one business model, and it just shows that there's different approaches to having conversations with sellers, and that's what works for you. You feel comfortable with it. And that was kind of the approach I took as well. I was always the investor. But there's different way. You have to think about, marketing in a non-sleazy kind of way, but you have to think about what your pitch is going to be like to sellers. And that's your pitch. That's what works. That's your value add. And the other conversation I had about being the referral business, I mean, that could be an approach you use. And I do think like if you are going to become an agent and be an investor, I do think you need to keep that investor hat on. That's why I would not want to be a listing agent and go out and list it. I would want to be a partner. Like I just think a referral business is a really cool business model for an agent to have if you're not going to be super active. And I just think we as investors get so many leads. And the thing that struck me one time is how many opportunities that were not opportunities for me, but like, 10 agents would have loved to have that conversation I just had. And I spent 2 hours sitting there talking to this person, building trust and a relationship. And then there it goes. And you can look at it from two different angles. One, I didn't make any money on it. So it was a business opportunity, but there's also a value add opportunity. Like they might've been looking for a referral from somebody who knew the business, and I could have added value to them by saying, all right, here's Jeff. He's an agent. He's really good. You don't have to use Jeff. You can use whoever you want, but I've used him. I like him. You ought to check him out if you're going to be listing your house.
Yeah. And what you just said there is exactly the thing that then makes my brain go back to, okay, maybe I should. Maybe I should. Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like if you look at everything that I do, where do I create value? Like where's my the greatest application of my skill set is in building the connection with the people. And if that's not getting, monetized sounds kind of crude, but let's be honest, like that's kind of what we're talking about. There's some return on the value that you created, the relationship value you created for somebody.
Yep.
I know I've left a lot of, value, whether it's money or whatever, on the table from those people who I probably could have referred or serviced as an agent, but.
Yep. Oh, wow. Hey, it's fun to know that I've apparently done well, and we could have done even better. That there's always opportunities for growth and potential improvement.
Yeah. Yeah. So if today the perfect deal just, walked in front of you, what would that look like for you where you are right now?
I think there's two different ones. So I've got two different property managers I feel pretty comfortable with here in Clemson. So, we actually bought a lot of properties already this year. So I'm kind of like after Thanksgiving dinner, where your belly's full, and I'm like, I don't know that I want any more food. I'm stuffed. So it might be a kind of tough time for me to answer that question. But earlier this year, the perfect deal is sort of a value add multi-unit property within a mile or two from campus, of Clemson University's campus. And so that's the value add, meaning, if people don't know what that word means, is an opportunity, a multi-unit property, typically small multi-units for me, that have maybe rents are low, maybe they're mismanaged, maybe there's some opportunity to do something to the property. Greg Penia would call this expandability. There's something you can do to it to increase the rent or increase the value of the property. And so for me, for example, we've bought properties that have kind of like Monopoly. You have 2 houses, you have 4 units on there right now, but you could build 15 units on there based on the zoning and the density of the zoning. Those are some opportunities for me. But I think beyond the opportunity, the money part of it is also they're in a space where I could hire these management companies to do it, because I want to put the deal together. I'll be behind the scenes, putting the money together, putting everything, but I don't want to be the one collecting rent. I don't want to be the one even managing the remodel anymore. I want to hire the management company to do that. So that's a perfect deal this year. Was those, there's meat on the bone in terms of finances. It's in an area that I can pass it off to the manager, and then we can also improve our cash flow, increase our net worth, and put some money to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have property managers that you work with now. Have you done it that way all along? Did you manage your own properties at one point, or how has that journey of property management gone?
It's been an evolution. And so Tommy and I, my business partner, we used to do everything ourselves. I still do a lot of the behind the scenes bookkeeping. I like to keep I'm doing less of that with the property managers. They pay more of the bills now than I did. But even when I was in Ecuador for a year and a half in 2017 and 18, I had some property managers for a group of properties, but then I had a bookkeeper who worked with me for years and did a good job. She did a lot of the day-to-day communication with our tenants and taking maintenance calls and things like that. And so I would still pay bills every Thursday. So I would do online bill pay and kind of keep my mind in that. And so we've done everything from me being the one who signed the leases, meeting the person at the library, doing the lease up, managing the contractors. And then we've evolved to where I had somebody internally who did a lot of that work for me, and I just outsourced it to her. And I did about 10% of our kind of self-management. And then we're now moving she's actually decided to semi-retire and do a lot less of that. So we this year moved to more of a pure just financial, get a property manager who does almost everything, pays the bills, collects the rent, handles remodels, handles maintenance, handles turnovers. And then I'm behind the scenes kind of working with 1 or 2 people at that property management company. And so far I like it. I like the, kind of the theme I talked about earlier. It's allowing me to see things from a distance. And sometimes I think it makes you, forces you to make some better strategic decisions. You're not, for example, when you're the one talking to the tenant and you're emotionally involved in that situation, it's much harder to make the right financial decision for either one of you than if you're sitting back and getting an email from your property manager who says, here's the situation. It's a little bit easier for me, at least, to be objective and just go with the criteria that I decided ahead of time.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, I agree. We do our property management in-house, but I'm not the first line of communication. And so I find that too, the space that I have of that allows me to probably make better types of decisions that are less reactive and things like that. Yeah. It's like Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing is not just about the acquisition side. There's a whole element of how you work with people and on a tenant basis, and even when you're selling properties and stuff like that. And so that it's a delicate balance, I think, of, I always tell people it's like the hardest part, I think, of kind of what we do is the balance between the human mentality and the business mentality. And when it comes right down to where people live, who are, real people, it's a challenging balance to have, I think.
I'll agree with you. And I'll give everybody a specific example of a challenging situation we've run into with tenants. And this is more my bookkeeper, she's just a wonderful people person, and she kind of led the situation. But we had a gentleman who had been a tenant of ours for 8 or 9 years, and he was in one apartment, and he did a great job with us there. And we had another opening, and he went to a mobile home we had, and he rented this mobile home from us. He was kind of type of tenant that kept quiet, kept to himself, just paid his rent. Every once in a while, there'd be a maintenance issue. He'd call, we'd take care of it. But that's about it. And then one month after like 9 years, he starts getting behind on his payments. And our bookkeeper calls him, finds out what's going on, and learns that he has lost whatever source of income he had. I think he was doing kind of some work, and this is a low rent. This is about as low as it gets. If he can't rent this, that's it. And we were super torn because, the policy says, all right, you haven't paid by the 5th. On the 6th, we have a conversation with you. If it looks like you can't make your payment, you got to move one way or the other. Like if you're not communicate with us, we might have to file an eviction. If you're working with us to make a payment, and you have a way to pay it, we'll work with you. In his case, he didn't have a way to pay it. And he was just honest with us. Like, I don't have a way to pay it. I also don't have any family. I don't have anywhere to go, and he was in a situation where, like, all right, if he doesn't live here, like, where does he go? Like, there's nothing else to do. And so we really deliberated about it. And I'm not, it wasn't my original idea, but my bookkeeper started calling around and saying, like, we delayed the eviction, first of all. But we decided that he couldn't stay there. Like, it wasn't going to work because we have been running a business here and we have obligations to other people. But we could spend our extra time and effort to try to place him somewhere that wasn't like just kicking him on the street. And so we called 2 or 3 homeless shelters in the area. We called like other charities, and we found somewhere that he could go live temporarily and that wasn't just gonna be on the street. And, I'm not saying it's always going to work out that way, but I think that's what I appreciate about what you're saying is, like, if you have that intention to, yes, I got to run a business. Yes, I got to be profitable, but there are some opportunities sometimes to go a little bit above and beyond. And that was a particular case with this person who worked for me. I just felt really proud that she did that. And she called, and we hired our handyman to bring his truck out there and move this guy's stuff for him at our cost. He owed us money, but you know what? Like, that's part of the deal. And that was, in the end of the day, that worked. We felt good about that. And from a business standpoint, because we were proactive and did that ourselves, he might have just sat there and never called us back, and we would have had to evict him. That's how it could have been. And it could have been ugly. He might have got torn up the property. As it was, we ended up getting the property back relatively, 30 days or so. And it was not torn up. And, so that money, even the business decision also, I think, worked out by doing that.
Yeah. And that's a great story and a great example that sort of doing the right thing, so to speak, and the business mindset don't have to be, it's not necessarily one or the other, right?
Right.
It can be both. The way that I articulate something similar to myself these days is that I feel like, unfortunately, in my position, I can't always give people the news they want to hear, but I can make sure we always do it with respect and empathy and understanding and, kindness. And to me, that's what you did there, right? The unfortunate news is, you can't live here anymore if you're not going to be able to pay your rent. But we can deliver this message and soften it to the greatest extent we can.
Yep. Maybe you can give me a coaching session on doing that with my kids too. Like, I have a hard time. How do you do that?
Way out of my depth there. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So to wrap it up, I want to bring it back to what you're doing, as a thought leader, as an educator. And I guess just a first question is, you're in a good spot in your life, in your career, in your real estate portfolio. Why do you choose to dedicate time to blogging and podcasting and spreading the word that you do?
Yes, good question. I think first and foremost, I enjoy it. It's fun. I go back to earlier. I like learning, and I think sometimes people who are teachers also really love learning. And so I think I see it like a cycle. And so originally this whole blogging thing was selfish for me. Like, I didn't really think anybody would read it. I knew a few people would read it, but I didn't think anybody would read it. And so it was a way for me to organize my thoughts, put things on paper. And I think with everything in life, you kind of see that, I might have there's some people who say this is helpful for them. And so maybe I have some talent for that. Let me cultivate that talent. Let me get better at communicating. Let me get better. So I have probably written, the first 3 or 4 years, I was writing thousands and thousands of words to nobody. But I tracked it for a while. Like, it's probably been 8-9 years that I've been writing, 100,000 words per year kind of thing. And so you just get better at it. I feel like I'm pretty good at it. I have fun with it. And then I get the feedback that it's helpful to people. And I've I've talked about it with people from a real estate standpoint. Like I had a fork in the road where I probably could use those same skills to teach people, like to make a business here locally. I could have expanded from Clemson to Greenville and, had a branch office and done that and taught a team. And that's another way to leverage your skills as well. But for me, I really get a lot of enjoyment out of the internet and online media. I think it's so fascinating that through a very inexpensive medium, I can deliver something and help 1,000 people kind of get a light bulb moment and get it. And so I kind of tell myself isn't this pretty cool if I could help 1,000 people buy 3 houses, and I could have tried to buy 3,000 houses myself, building like some branch offices. But to me, if somebody wants to do that, that's great. That's their model. Like for me though, the 1,000 people who buy 3 houses and me helping them do that was just a much more satisfying model than trying to take over the world as a real estate investor. And so that's what motivates me. And I have very, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I really don't know what this will look like. Like if it stops being fun, if it stops helping people, if I have enough to say, I've already said it all. All right, let's move on. Maybe I'll do something different. But for now, it's still intriguing and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, that's cool. So if people want to find out more about you and what you're doing, what's the best place for them to go to do that?
CoachCarson.com is my home online. So I have a blog there. I have a big archive of articles. And if you want to, I have a free course there as well. It depends on what level people are at. If you're just really kind of getting started, you can go to CoachCarson.com/free course. And it's an email course that kind of takes you through the basic first steps of real estate investing, helping you get your mind around a strategy, a target market, and just kind of help you get some clarity and focus. But anybody at any level, if you're interested, I like to write about financial independence. I like to write about real estate investing, that intersection. And I'm also doing a podcast these days. So you can find my podcast at that same website.
Okay, cool. And did you publish a book in the last year or so?
I did do that. Yeah, thanks. So my book is called Retire Early with Real Estate. And you can find that on Amazon. And a lot of people have gotten that. It's published by Bigger Pockets. It's a great organization. And so you can get that on Amazon. And one of the cool, fun things about that book is I distilled sort of my blueprint on the different ways. I also compare it to like climbing a mountain. So if climbing the mountain is financial independence, there's a lot of different routes up that mountain, even within real estate investing. So I tried to show those routes and help you find yourself on the mountain. And then I had a lot of fun getting to interview 24 other people who are at various levels of achieving financial independence with real estate. And so I have profiles at the end of every chapter on those different real estate investors. And so my hope was that, here's my story. I've got one approach. There's a lot of other people who've started at different places from different backgrounds. And so I tried to share a lot of stories as well to go along with the kind of how-to blueprint stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chad. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. And I'm so grateful that you decided to come on.
It's been great. You're an awesome interviewer. I see this show doing really well. So thanks for your time and having me on here.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing. Remember, solve the person to unlock the deal and solve the financing to unlock the profits.